What if the dead never actually stop working? That unexplainable chill, the feeling that you're not alone, objects falling for no reason, dreams so real you woke up confused. Why did that perfume she used to wear suddenly appear out of nowhere in your hallway? Why were you absolutely certain you heard her calling you by your childhood nickname? Coincidence? Carl Jung would tell you that you're being naive. For decades, studying the human mind, Jung made a shocking discovery that traditional science refuses to accept. Dead people and animals continue to be active, working tirelessly behind the scenes of your daily life. No, this isn't cheap spiritualism or grandma's superstitions. Jung scientifically mapped how the deceased operate through deep psychological channels, influencing your choices, sending messages through your dreams, and even protecting you from dangers you don't even notice. He documented real cases of people who received warnings from dead relatives that saved their lives. What you're going to discover today will finally explain all those strange moments that you always knew weren't coincidences. 1. The collective unconscious, where the dead live forever. Imagine a vast underground library that connects every human mind that has ever existed. This is what Jung called the collective unconscious, a hidden mental space where all our thoughts, memories, and experiences from generations past are stored and remain alive. When someone dies, their essence doesn't vanish into nothing. Instead, it becomes part of this enormous psychological network that influences everyone who comes after them. Think about it this way. Every time you have a gut feeling about something, every time you know something without being taught, every time you feel drawn to certain places or people, that's the dead speaking through this invisible connection. They're not gone. They've simply moved to a different level of existence where they can reach more people at once. This underground mental world operates like a massive internet connection that spans across time and space. Your great-grandmother's wisdom about relationships, your grandfather's understanding of hard work, even the protective instincts of pets who passed away. All of this information flows through this hidden network and shows up in your daily decisions without you realizing it. Jung discovered that this collective space holds what he called archetypes, universal patterns of behavior and thinking that the dead have passed down through generations. When you instinctively know how to comfort a crying child, when you feel the urge to protect your family, when you sense danger before it happens, you're tapping into ancient wisdom that deceased ancestors placed in this shared mental storage. The most fascinating part is that this connection works both ways. Just as the dead can influence you, your thoughts and actions can reach them too. When you honor someone's memory, when you live according to values they taught you, when you make decisions they would be proud of, you're actively communicating with them through this invisible psychological bridge. Many people report feeling their deceased loved one's presence most strongly during important life moments. Weddings, births, major decisions. This isn't imagination or wishful thinking. It's the collective unconscious at work, allowing the dead to participate in these crucial moments through the psychological imprints they left behind. This hidden mental realm also explains why certain family patterns repeat across generations. The dead don't just leave behind physical possessions or written words, they leave psychological blueprints that guide their descendants' behavior. Your tendency to worry, like your mother, your grandfather's stubborn streak that shows up in you, your grandmother's way of showing love through cooking, these aren't just learned behaviors. They're active influences from the deceased operating through this collective mental space. Jung believed that understanding this connection was essential for personal growth. When you become aware that the dead are still active in your psychological life, you can start to recognize their influence and choose which aspects to embrace and which to transform. You can have conscious conversations with deceased family members by paying attention to the thoughts and feelings that arise when you focus on them. The collective unconscious also serves as a protective mechanism. The accumulated wisdom of all who died before you creates an internal warning system that helps you avoid dangers they once faced. That unexplained feeling of unease in certain situations, that voice in your head telling you not to trust someone, these could be messages from the dead who learned hard lessons and want to spare you the same pain. This isn't about ghosts or supernatural phenomena. It's about understanding that death doesn't end our psychological influence on the world. Every person who dies becomes part of the vast mental network that shapes human behavior, continuing their work of guiding, protecting, and teaching through the invisible threads that connect all minds across time. 2. Dreams, the direct phone line to those who left. Your bedroom becomes a communication center every single night, and you probably don't even realize it. When you fall asleep, your conscious mind steps aside and allows something much more powerful to take control. Your unconscious mind, which has a direct connection to everyone who has ever meant something to you, including those who are no longer alive. Dreams aren't random brain activity like many scientists claim. Jung understood that they serve as a sophisticated communication system between the living and the dead. During sleep, the barriers that normally separate your everyday awareness from deeper psychological realms dissolve completely. This creates the perfect conditions for deceased loved ones to reach out and make contact. The dead have been trying to communicate with you through your dreams your entire life. That vivid dream, where your father gave you advice about your career, wasn't just your brain processing memories. It was actually him, working through the psychological channels that remain open between you. The dream where your childhood dog appeared to comfort you during a difficult time wasn't wishful thinking. It was a real visitation happening in the only realm where such meetings are possible. What makes dream communication so powerful is that the deceased aren't limited by the physical restrictions they had while alive. In dreams, they can appear young and healthy, they can speak in ways they never could in life, and they can share wisdom that goes beyond what they knew when they were living. This is because death doesn't end their growth and understanding. It transforms it into something larger and more complete. Jung noticed that dreams involving the dead often carry specific types of messages. Sometimes they come with warnings about upcoming challenges or dangers. Other times they offer comfort during periods of grief or stress. Frequently, they provide guidance for important decisions you're facing. The deceased seem to have access to information about your life that goes beyond what any living person could know. The timing of these dreams is never random. They tend to occur when you most need guidance, comfort, or protection. Your deceased mother appears in a dream right before you make a major life change. Your grandfather shows up in a dream when you're struggling with a moral dilemma. Your childhood pet visits your dreams when you're feeling alone and abandoned. This precise timing reveals that the dead are actively monitoring your life and intervening when necessary. One of the most remarkable aspects of dream communication is that the dead often appear with knowledge they didn't have while alive. A grandmother who died before you got married might appear in a dream offering specific advice about your relationship troubles. A father who passed away when you were young might show up with detailed guidance about parenting your own children. This suggests that death expands their awareness rather than ending it. The emotional quality of these dreams is also distinctive. When the dead visit you in dreams, there's usually an overwhelming sense of love, peace, and protection that lingers long after you wake up. This isn't your brain creating false comfort. It's the actual emotional signature of deceased loved ones reaching across the divide between life and death to let you know they're still caring for you. Sometimes the dead use dreams to complete unfinished business or heal old wounds. A parent who was emotionally distant in life might appear in dreams to express love they couldn't show while alive. A friend who died after an argument might visit your dreams to offer forgiveness or ask for it. These healing encounters can transform your relationship with the deceased and bring closure that seemed impossible while they were living. Jung also discovered that animals who have died maintain the same dream communication abilities as humans. Pets who formed strong bonds with their owners continue to visit them in dreams, often appearing to provide comfort during difficult times or to reassure their human companions that they're safe and happy in whatever realm they now inhabit. The key to recognizing genuine communication from the dead in dreams is paying attention to the clarity and emotional impact of the experience. Dreams that involve deceased loved ones tend to be more vivid, more memorable, and more emotionally significant than regular dreams. They often contain specific information or guidance that proves helpful in your waking life, confirming that real communication has occurred. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the Sim Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. 3. Synchronicities. When the dead send signals. Have you ever noticed how certain things seem to happen at exactly the right moment, as if someone invisible was pulling strings behind the scenes? Jung called these meaningful coincidences synchronicities, and he believed they were one of the primary ways the dead communicate with the living. Unlike dreams that happen while you sleep, these messages appear in your waking life through perfectly timed events that can't be explained by normal cause and effect. When your deceased father's favorite song plays on the radio just as you're struggling with a decision he would have helped you make, that's not chance. When you find a coin in an unusual place on the anniversary of your grandmother's death, that's not random. When a butterfly lands on your shoulder during your mother's funeral, that's not nature being poetic. These are deliberate communications from those who have crossed over, using the invisible threads that connect all events to send you messages of love, guidance, and support. The dead have learned to work with the natural flow of energy that moves through everything in the universe. They can't physically manipulate objects the way they could when they were alive, but they can influence the timing and placement of events to create meaningful patterns that catch your attention. Think of them as master coordinators, orchestrating seemingly separate events to deliver exactly the message you need at exactly the moment you need it. Animals often serve as messengers in these divine coincidences. A red cardinal appearing repeatedly after someone dies, a cat showing up at your door during a period of loneliness, a dog approaching you with unusual friendliness when you're feeling lost. These aren't random animal behaviors. The deceased are working through these creatures to remind you that you're not alone and that you're being watched over with love and care. Numbers also carry special significance in the language of synchronicity. Seeing your loved one's birthday numbers repeatedly, noticing the time of their death appearing on clocks when you're thinking about them, finding their anniversary date in unexpected places. These numerical coincidences are like cosmic text messages from beyond, confirming that your connection with them transcends physical death. The dead also communicate through what Jung called meaningful accidents. Objects breaking at significant moments, electronics malfunctioning when you're avoiding important conversations, cars refusing to start when you're about to make a mistake. These apparent problems are often protective interventions from deceased loved ones, who can see dangers and opportunities that you can't perceive from your limited human perspective. Sometimes the messages come through other people who say exactly what your deceased loved one would have said, often without knowing anything about your relationship with that person. A stranger offering comfort with words your mother used to say, a cashier making a joke your father would have made, a child reminding you of something your grandmother believed. These human messengers are being guided by the deceased to deliver specific communications at precisely the right moments. Weather patterns can also carry messages from those who have passed. Unexpected sunshine breaking through clouds during difficult times, gentle rain beginning just as you start to cry, wind picking up when you're feeling their presence. The dead have learned to work with natural forces to create atmospheric communications that speak directly to your heart and confirm that they're still actively involved in your life. Even technology becomes a communication tool for the deceased. Photos appearing on your phone that you didn't take, music playlists changing on their own, electronic devices turning on or off at meaningful moments. While skeptics dismiss these as technical glitches, Jung understood that the dead can influence electrical energy to create technological synchronicities that deliver their messages through the devices that fill our modern lives. The most powerful synchronicities often involve multiple coordinated events happening in sequence. Your deceased spouse's favorite flower appearing in an unexpected place, followed by their song playing in a store, followed by someone mentioning their name. When several meaningful coincidences cluster together like this, it's a clear sign that they're working hard to get your attention and remind you that death hasn't ended their love and concern for you. Learning to recognize these divine coincidences transforms your entire relationship with loss and grief. Instead of feeling abandoned by death, you begin to see evidence everywhere that your loved ones are still actively participating in your life, just in ways that require a different kind of awareness to perceive and appreciate. 4. Archetypes, the eternal personalities of the deceased. When someone dies, their individual personality doesn't simply disappear into nothing. Instead, it transforms into something much larger and more powerful, what Jung called an archetype. These are eternal personality patterns that transcend individual death and continue to influence the world through anyone who carries similar traits or faces similar life challenges. Your deceased grandmother doesn't just live on in your memories. She becomes part of a timeless pattern of wise, nurturing energy that guides people everywhere. Think of archetypes as universal roles that humans have played throughout all of history. The protective father, the wise mother, the brave warrior, the gentle healer, the loyal friend. These aren't just personality types, they're eternal templates that get passed down from the dead to the living. When your grandfather dies, his protective father energy doesn't vanish. It joins the vast reservoir of fatherly wisdom that has been building since the beginning of human existence. This is why certain people remind you so strongly of deceased loved ones, even when they've never met. You're not imagining the similarity. You're recognizing the same archetypal energy operating through different individuals. The deceased work through these living representatives to continue their influence in the world. Your mother's nurturing spirit might show up through a kind teacher, a helpful neighbor, or even a caring stranger who appears exactly when you need maternal comfort. The dead actively choose which living people to work through based on compatibility and need. They're drawn to individuals who share similar values, face similar challenges, or have the capacity to carry forward their unfinished work. This explains why you might feel an instant connection with someone who embodies qualities your deceased loved one possessed. They're literally channeling that person's archetypal energy. These eternal personality patterns also explain why certain traits seem to run in families across generations. It's not just genetics or learned behavior, it's deceased family members passing down their archetypal essence through the bloodline. Your great-grandfather's determination, your aunt's artistic gifts, your grandmother's intuitive abilities. These qualities flow from the dead to the living through archetypal inheritance that goes far beyond physical DNA. Jung discovered that the deceased can strengthen their archetypal influence by working together. All the protective fathers who have ever died collaborate to create a massive reservoir of fatherly energy. All the wise mothers who have passed away combine their nurturing power. This collective archetypal force becomes incredibly powerful, capable of inspiring and guiding entire generations of living people who need those particular qualities. The dead also use archetypal energy to heal wounds they couldn't address while alive. A father who was emotionally distant during life might work through the archetype of the wise mentor to guide his children through other father figures they encounter. A mother who struggled with addiction might channel her energy through the healer archetype to help her family members find recovery and wholeness. Sometimes the deceased manifest their archetypal presence through fictional characters that deeply move you. That movie character who reminds you of your father, that book hero who embodies your mother's strength, that song that perfectly captures your friend's spirit. These aren't coincidences. The dead work through creative inspiration to ensure their archetypal essence appears in stories and art that will touch the hearts of those who knew them. Animals can also carry archetypal energy from deceased humans. The loyal dog who reminds you of your grandfather's faithfulness, the graceful cat who embodies your grandmother's elegance, the protective bird who seems to watch over your family. These creatures become living representations of human archetypes, allowing the deceased to continue their caring presence through different forms of life. The most profound aspect of archetypal inheritance is that it allows the dead to evolve and grow beyond what they achieved in life. Death doesn't freeze their development, it expands it. Your deceased loved ones can become better versions of themselves as archetypes than they ever were as living individuals, offering you guidance and support that surpasses anything they could provide while limited by human flaws and circumstances. Understanding archetypal inheritance changes how you relate to the deceased and how you understand your own purpose. You begin to see yourself not just as an individual, but as a carrier of archetypal energy from all who have influenced you. You become responsible for taking the best qualities of your deceased loved ones and expressing them through your own unique personality and life circumstances. This creates a beautiful cycle where the dead continue to grow through the living, and the living are strengthened by the wisdom and power of those who have gone before. Death becomes not an ending, but a transformation into a more powerful and influential form of existence that can touch countless lives across generations. 5. The shadow of the dead. How they influence our dark side. Not everything the dead pass on to us is positive and healing. Jung understood that deceased loved ones also carry forward their unresolved problems, hidden fears, and destructive patterns, what he called the shadow. When someone dies without facing their demons, those dark aspects don't disappear. Instead, they become psychological inheritance that gets passed down to the living, often showing up as mysterious compulsions, unexplained fears, and self-destructive behaviors that seem to come from nowhere. Your inexplicable fear of abandonment might actually belong to your grandmother, who lost her parents at a young age and never processed that trauma. Your tendency to sabotage relationships could be carrying forward your grandfather's fear of intimacy that he never addressed while alive. Your struggles with money might be inherited from a deceased parent who lived through poverty and died with deep anxiety about financial security embedded in their psychological DNA. The shadow inheritance works differently than the positive archetypal energy we discussed earlier. While loving guidance flows consciously through dreams and synchronicities, shadow material operates underground, influencing your behavior without your awareness. You find yourself repeating patterns that don't make sense for your own life experiences, reacting to situations with emotions that seem too intense or inappropriate, making choices that sabotage your happiness for reasons you can't understand. This unconscious influence from the dead explains why family dysfunction tends to repeat across generations, even when people consciously try to break the cycle. The deceased family members who created the original problems are still psychologically active, unconsciously encouraging their descendants to repeat the same mistakes. They're not doing this out of malice. They simply don't know any other way to exist, even in death. The most challenging aspect of shadow inheritance is that it often gets disguised as positive traits. Your workaholic tendencies might seem like admirable dedication, but they could actually be carrying forward a deceased parent's fear of being seen as lazy or worthless. Your people-pleasing behavior might appear kind and generous, but it could be inherited from someone who died believing they weren't lovable unless they constantly served others. Jung discovered that the dead can become trapped in their own unresolved psychological patterns, unable to move forward until someone in the living world recognizes and heals the shadow material they've passed down. This creates a strange form of psychological purgatory where the deceased remains stuck in their old wounds, unconsciously influencing their living descendants to act out the same unhealed dramas. Breaking free from shadow inheritance requires becoming conscious of patterns that don't truly belong to you. When you notice yourself behaving in ways that seem foreign to your authentic nature, when you find yourself carrying fears that don't match your actual experiences, when you discover you're repeating destructive choices that someone else in your family made, these are signs that you're carrying psychological baggage from the dead. The process of healing shadow inheritance is actually a gift you give to both yourself and the deceased. When you recognize and transform the negative patterns they pass down, you free them from the psychological prison they've been trapped in since death. They can finally let go of the wounds and fears that kept them stuck, allowing them to evolve into the loving, supportive, archetypal energy they were meant to become. Sometimes the shadow inheritance shows up as physical symptoms or health problems that mirror what the deceased experienced. Chronic pain in the same body parts where your grandmother suffered, anxiety attacks that match your father's panic disorder, sleep disturbances that echo your mother's insomnia. The body can carry forward the unhealed trauma of the dead in very literal ways. Addictive behaviors are particularly common forms of shadow inheritance. The deceased person's relationship with alcohol, drugs, food, gambling, or other compulsive behaviors can be passed down as psychological predispositions that feel impossible to resist. The living person finds themselves battling demons that technically belong to someone who is already dead, making recovery especially challenging without understanding the true source of the compulsion. The dead can also pass down their relationship patterns through shadow inheritance. If your deceased father had a fear of strong women, you might find yourself unconsciously attracted to partners who won't challenge you, even though this doesn't align with your conscious values. If your deceased mother had trust issues, you might discover that you sabotage close friendships without understanding why. Recognizing shadow inheritance isn't about blaming the dead for your problems. It's about understanding that healing these patterns serves everyone involved. The deceased didn't choose to pass down their wounds. They simply didn't have the tools or awareness to heal them while alive. By doing the work they couldn't complete, you become an agent of healing that extends backward through your family line and forward to future generations. The most liberating realization is that you have the power to transform inherited shadow material into wisdom and strength. The fear that your grandmother couldn't face becomes your opportunity to develop courage. The addiction that destroyed your father becomes your pathway to understanding recovery and helping others. The relationship wounds that your mother carried become your chance to learn healthy love and break the cycle of dysfunction. 6. Family complexes, the ghosts we inherit. Every family creates invisible emotional patterns that get passed down from generation to generation, like psychological heirlooms. Jung called these complexes powerful emotional clusters that operate independently within your psyche, making you react to certain situations in ways that have nothing to do with your current circumstances. When family members die, their complexes don't disappear. Instead, they become ghostly influences that continue to shape how their descendants think, feel, and behave in relationships. Think of complexes as emotional programs that run automatically in the background of your mind. Your great-grandmother's complex about never being good enough doesn't die with her. It downloads into the family psychological system and can activate in any descendant who faces similar triggers. Suddenly, you find yourself feeling inadequate in situations where you should feel confident, not because of anything you've experienced, but because you're running your ancestors' emotional software. These inherited emotional patterns explain why family gatherings often feel so intense and complicated. Everyone in the room is not just dealing with their own feelings. They're unconsciously channeling the unresolved emotional complexes of deceased family members. Your aunt's anger might be carrying forward your great-grandfather's rage. Your cousin's depression could be expressing your grandmother's unexpressed grief. The family dinner becomes a stage where the living act out the emotional dramas of the dead. The most common inherited complex revolves around worthiness and belonging. If previous generations struggled with feeling accepted or valuable, this complex gets passed down and creates a family atmosphere where love feels conditional and approval seems impossible to earn. Children grow up working desperately to prove themselves worthy of love, not understanding that they're trying to heal a wound that belongs to someone who died long before they were born. Money complexes are another powerful inheritance from the deceased. Families who survived poverty, economic crashes, or financial betrayal often pass down complex emotional relationships with money that have nothing to do with current circumstances. You might find yourself hoarding resources even when you have plenty, or sabotaging financial success because somewhere in your family line, someone learned that money was dangerous or that wealthy people were bad. Power and authority complexes also flow through family lines from the deceased. If your ancestors had traumatic experiences with authority figures, or if they themselves abused power, these dynamics continue to play out in how family members relate to bosses, government, institutions, and even each other. You might find yourself either submitting too easily to authority or rebelling against it in ways that hurt your own interests. The complexity of inherited family dynamics becomes even more intricate when you consider that you're not just carrying complexes from your direct bloodline. Marriage brings together two entirely different sets of inherited emotional patterns. Your spouse's family complexes interact with your family complexes, creating new combinations of psychological inheritance that your children will carry forward. Jung noticed that certain family complexes can lay dormant for generations, and then suddenly activate when circumstances align with the original trauma. A family complex about abandonment might remain quiet until someone faces divorce or death, then suddenly flood the entire family system with emotions that seem way out of proportion to the current situation. The living family members find themselves drowning in feelings that belong to ancestors who experienced the original abandonment generations ago. Breaking free from inherited family complexes requires developing what Jung called conscious relationship with these patterns. This means recognizing when your emotional reactions are too intense for the situation, noticing when you're playing out family dramas that don't belong to you, and learning to separate your authentic feelings from the inherited emotional baggage you've been carrying. The process of healing family complexes often involves going backward through family history to understand where the patterns originated. When you can identify which ancestor first developed a particular complex and what trauma or circumstance created it, you can begin to separate yourself from that inherited emotional program and respond to your current life from your own authentic center. Sometimes healing inherited complexes requires family members to work together, since these patterns affect everyone in the family system. One person's willingness to face and transform an inherited complex can free other family members from carrying the same burden. This creates a ripple effect of healing that extends both forward to future generations and backward to the deceased, who originally carried the wound. The most powerful insight about family complexes is that they represent unfinished emotional business from the dead. The ancestors who couldn't process their trauma while alive continue to seek healing through their living descendants. When you heal an inherited complex, you're not just freeing yourself, you're completing the emotional work that your deceased family members were unable to finish, allowing them to finally find peace and move on to become sources of wisdom and support, rather than unconscious sources of emotional pain. Now you understand the profound truth that Carl Jung spent decades uncovering. Death is not an ending, but a transformation into a different kind of existence, where the deceased continue their work through invisible psychological channels that connect all human consciousness. Every unexplained feeling, every meaningful coincidence, every inherited family pattern, every vivid dream of loved ones who have passed. These are not products of imagination or wishful thinking. They are evidence of an ongoing relationship with those who have crossed over, a relationship that transcends physical death and continues to shape your daily life in ways both healing and challenging. The dead are not gone. They have simply moved to a realm where their influence can reach farther and deeper than ever before, working tirelessly behind the scenes to guide, protect, teach, and sometimes burden their living descendants. Understanding this changes everything about how you view loss, grief, family patterns, and your own purpose in life. You are not just living for yourself. You are part of an eternal conversation between the living and the dead, carrying forward their wisdom while healing their wounds, ensuring that love and consciousness continue their endless journey through time. Death may silence the voice, but it amplifies the soul's ability to touch hearts across generations.